The sky above Tethys Prime burned orange and red. Ambassador Krelna stood at the window of the council building, watching his world die. The peaceful Velkaran people had never known war. For 300 years, they had lived in harmony, studying art and science, raising their children without fear. Now, in just 3 days, everything was ending. The Krathax had come from the dark between stars. Their ships were living things, grown from flesh and chitin, dripping with acid and hunger. They descended on the cities like a plague, and where they landed, nothing lived. The Velkarans had no weapons to fight them, no soldiers to defend their homes. They had believed the galaxy was a place of reason and peace. They had been wrong. Krelna watched as another section of the city collapsed. The Krathax bioconstructs tore through buildings like they were made of paper. He could hear the screaming even through the thick walls. His people were dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Ambassador, we must leave," his aide said, pulling at his arm. "The defense shields are failing." "Defense shields," Krelna said bitterly. "We built them to stop radiation and solar flares. Not this. Not invasion." But he followed his aide down the stairs, into the bunker beneath the council building. Hundreds of Velkarans huddled there in the darkness, their large eyes wide with terror. Children clung to their parents. The elderly sat in quiet despair. "Can anyone hear us?" Krelna spoke into the communication device. "This is Tethys Prime, Sector 7. We are under attack. Our people are dying. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help." He broadcast on every frequency their equipment could reach. Most of the planetary network was destroyed, but the deep space transmitter still worked. The message went out into the void, desperate and small. "Please," Krelna continued, "we have no weapons, we have no army. We are a peaceful people. Our children are dying in the streets. If there is anyone out there, anyone at all, please help us." The message repeated automatically, sent again and again into the empty darkness of space. 3 jump points away, Commander Jake Harrison sat in the briefing room of Firebase Sanctuary. He was tired. His unit had just finished a 2-month deployment on the border worlds, dealing with pirates and smugglers. They were supposed to have rest time, but the galaxy never stopped producing problems. "Sir, you need to hear this," Lieutenant Kyle Martinez said, entering the room quickly. He carried a data pad and looked worried. Jake took the pad and listened to the recording. The translation was rough, the alien language breaking through in places, but the meaning was clear. Someone was dying. Someone was begging for help. "Where is this coming from?" Jake asked. "Tethys Prime. It's a Velkaran colony world, about 15 hours from here at best speed. What do we know about the Velkarans?" Kyle pulled up information on the main screen. "Peaceful species. No military. They're scientists and artists, mostly. Never been involved in any conflicts." "And the attackers?" "That's the problem, sir. We think it's the Krathax." Jake stood up straight. Every Marine knew about the Krathax. They were a hive species, driven only by hunger and the need to spread. They consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but dead rock behind. They had been pushing into this sector for months, and every time they appeared, billions died. "Get Colonel Rodriguez on the line," Jake ordered. Now, within an hour, every Marine on Firebase Sanctuary was preparing for deployment. Colonel Amy Rodriguez stood in the hangar bay of the carrier Valkyrie's Edge, watching her troops load equipment and ammunition. She had fought in 5 major campaigns and dozens of smaller actions. She had seen things that would break most people. But this was different. The Velkarans were civilians, all of them. They had no concept of organized violence, no understanding of war. They were about to be wiped out unless someone stopped it. "How long until we can jump?" she asked. "The Valkyrie's Edge can be ready in 2 hours," Captain Danny Rogers replied. "The rest of the fleet will follow in 3. Too slow. The Velkarans don't have 3 hours. We go with what we have. Get every dropship loaded. I want full combat loadout. For every Marine. Ma'am, if we go in with just the Valkyrie, we'll be outnumbered. Amy looked at him coldly. We're always outnumbered, Captain. That's never stopped us before. The orders went out. Marines grabbed their gear and ran for the drop ships. Sergeant Ryan Bennett strapped on his armor, checking each seal carefully. The armor was old, scarred from a dozen battles. But it had kept him alive through all of them. He trusted it more than he trusted most people. Next to him, Corporal Lisa Carter loaded magazines into her vest pouches. She didn't speak, focused entirely on her preparation. Ryan had served with her for 3 years. She was the best shot in the company and twice as mean as she needed to be. He was glad she was on his side. You heard the brief? Ryan asked. Civilians getting killed. We're going to stop it. Lisa slammed a magazine into her rifle to test the fit, then removed it and added it to her vest. Same as always, except these civilians never hurt anyone. Never even thought about hurting anyone. Lisa shrugged. Makes it easier then. Clear good guys, clear bad guys. I like simple. Corporal Megan Walsh joined them, her helmet under her arm. Transport leaves in 20 minutes. They're saying the Krathaks have surrounded the capital city. 7 million civilians trapped. 7 million. Ryan repeated. The number was too big to really understand. Each one was a person. A life. A family. And they were all about to die, unless the Marines got there in time. The dropships filled quickly. Marines settled into their crash harnesses, weapons held between their knees. The interior of the ship smelled like oil and sweat and fear. Though no Marine would admit to the fear part, they had learned to live with it, to push it down and use it as fuel. Jake Harrison walked down the line of ships, checking on his troops. They were ready. They were always ready. That was what made them Marines, but he could see the tension in their faces. This wasn't a normal mission. This was a race against time. And they were already behind. Listen up, Jake said over the company channel. The Velkarans sent out a distress call. They asked for anyone to help them. Anyone at all. And we answered. That means something. That means we don't let them down. He paused, looking at the faces of his Marines. I won't lie to you. This is going to be bad. The Krathaks don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They just kill and consume. We're going into a hot zone with limited support. Some of us might not come back. Ryan Bennett checked his rifle one more time. He had heard speeches like this before every major battle. They all said the same thing in different ways. Good people were dying, and it was up to the Marines to stop it. But here's what the Krathaks don't know, Jake continued. They've never fought Terran Marines before. They think they're the scariest thing in the galaxy. They're about to learn they're wrong. The ships began to power up, engines roaring to life. Amy Rodriguez stood in the command center of the Valkyrie's Edge, watching the tactical display. Tethys Prime was marked in red, indicating active combat. The Krathaks bioships formed a web around the planet, blocking any escape. All ships report ready, Kyle Martinez said. Then let's not keep them waiting, Amy replied. Jump when ready. The carrier lurched as the jump drive engaged. Space twisted around them. And for a moment that felt like forever and no time at all, they were between places. Then reality snapped back, and Tethys Prime appeared on the screens ahead of them. The planet was beautiful, covered in green forests and blue oceans. But now it was covered in smoke as well, rising from 1,000 fires. The Krathaks ships swarmed over it, like insects over carrion. Deploy all dropships, Amy ordered. Get our Marines on the ground. Now. On Tethys Prime, Ambassador Krelna heard the sound of new ships entering the atmosphere. For a moment, he felt hope die. More Krathaks, coming to finish what they had started. But then the ground shook with different explosions. Loud, sharp cracks that he had never heard before. What is that? Someone asked in the darkness. Krelna climbed back up the stairs, ignoring his aide's protests. He emerged onto the ruined street and looked up at the sky. Through the smoke and fire, he saw them. New ships, Different from the Krathax bio-vessels, these were metal and purpose, dropping toward the city like falling hammers. The first dropship hit the ground 3 blocks away. Its ramp opened before it fully stopped, and figures poured out. Not Velkarons. Not Krathax. Something else. Something that had answered their call. Ryan Bennett hit the ground running. The dropship's ramp had barely touched dirt before he was moving, his rifle up and ready. Around him, the rest of his squad deployed in perfect formation, each Marine covering a sector of fire. They had done this 1,000 times before, and they would do it 1,000 times more if they survived. The Krathax were everywhere. They swarmed through the ruined streets like ants, their 6 legs carrying them fast over rubble and debris. Their mandibles clicked and chittered, a sound that had terrified the Velkarons into paralysis. But Ryan Bennett was not Velkaron, and he had heard worse sounds in worse places. He put 3 rounds into the nearest Krathax warrior. The creature stumbled, green ichor spraying from the wounds, then collapsed. Ryan was already moving to the next target before the first hit the ground. "Contact left," Lisa Carter called out. She fired in controlled bursts, dropping 2 Krathax that tried to flank their position. "They're trying to surround us." "Let them try," Ryan replied. He keyed his radio. "Sergeant Bennett to command. LZ is hot but secure." Beginning sweep of the area, more dropships roared overhead, coming in fast and hard. The Krathax tried to shoot them down with bioplasma weapons, living cannons that spat acid and fire. Some shots connected, scarring armor and melting through hulls, but the Marine pilots were good, dodging and weaving through the fire, getting their cargo delivered no matter what. Jake Harrison's boots hit the ground amid chaos. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning. Weapons fire echoed off the damaged buildings, creating a constant thunder. He could hear the Velkarons crying out in their hiding places, terrified voices mixing with the inhuman sounds of the Krathax. "Alpha Company, on me," Jake ordered. "We're pushing toward the city center. Beta and Charlie, establish a defensive perimeter around the civilian shelters." The Marines moved out, advancing in pairs. One would move while the other covered. Then they would switch. It was basic infantry tactics, taught in boot camp, and refined through combat experience. The Krathax had numbers, but the Marines had training and discipline. Corporal Ben Foster carried the heavy missile launcher on his shoulder. It weighed 90 pounds, fully loaded. But Ben was strong. He had grown up on a high-gravity colony world, and Earth-standard gravity felt light to him. When a Krathax biotank appeared at the end of the street, he didn't hesitate. "Clear backblast," he announced, dropping to one knee. The Marines behind him moved aside. Ben aimed, tracked the target, and fired. The missile streaked away, trailing white smoke. It struck the biotank in its center mass and detonated. The creature exploded in a spray of chitin and flesh, the force of the blast knocking smaller Krathax warriors off their feet. "Target down," Ben reported. Reloading, Captain Danny Rogers led his company through the residential district. Here, the damage was worse. Buildings had collapsed entirely, crushing everything inside. Bodies lay in the streets, both Velkaron and Krathax. The aliens had been thorough, killing everyone they found. "Keep moving," Danny ordered. "We clear every building. If there are survivors, we get them to safety." Corporal Eric Shaw kicked in a door, his rifle sweeping the interior. The house was empty except for scattered belongings and signs of struggle. He moved to the next one, then the next. In the 4th house, he found a family of Velkarons huddled in a closet, too terrified to move. "It's okay," Eric said, though he knew they probably couldn't understand him. "You're safe now. Come on." He helped them out, guiding them toward the evacuation point. They stared at him with huge eyes, unable to process what they were seeing. The translator in his helmet struggled with their language, producing broken phrases. "Protector," one of them said. "You came." "You answered." "Yeah, we answered," Eric replied. "Now get moving. Stay low and follow the lights." The battle intensified as more Marines landed and pushed deeper into the city. The Krathax, surprised by genuine resistance, fell back to regroup. They had conquered dozens of worlds, and on every one, the defenders had broken quickly. The Velkarans were supposed to be easy prey, soft targets with no way to fight back. The presence of Terran Marines changed everything. Colonel Amy Rodriguez watched the tactical display from her command post aboard the Valkyrie's edge. Red markers showed Krathax positions. Blue markers showed her Marines. Green markers showed confirmed civilian safe zones. The map was a chaotic mess of colors, but patterns were emerging. The Krathax are concentrating their forces on the western edge of the city, Lieutenant Kyle Martinez reported. They're trying to cut off the civilian evacuation routes. Send in 2nd Battalion, Amy ordered. I want that route held open, no matter what. And get me air support over that sector. Yes, ma'am. Attack craft dove from the sky, their cannons ripping into Krathax formations. The aliens had adapted their bioships to ground combat, creating living artillery that could match human weapons. But they couldn't match human tactics or human determination. Sergeant Nicole Parker found herself separated from her squad during a running firefight. She had been clearing a building when the floor collapsed, dropping her into the basement. Now she was alone in the darkness, with Krathax sounds coming from above. She checked her ammunition. 2 magazines left, plus her sidearm. Not great, but she had worked with less. Nicole moved through the basement, looking for an exit. She found stairs leading up, but they were blocked by rubble. The sound of claws on concrete made her turn. A Krathax warrior had found the hole she fell through. It dropped into the basement, mandibles clicking as it searched for her in the darkness. Nicole aimed carefully. The creature's armor was thick in the front, designed to stop most weapons, but she knew the weak points. Every species had them. She waited until it turned slightly, exposing the joint where its head met its thorax, then fired 3 times. The Krathax collapsed. Nicole stepped over its body and climbed out through the hole, pulling herself up onto the ruined first floor. She could see her squad in the distance, still fighting. Parker to Sergeant Bennett. I'm on my way back. Had a little detour. Roger that, Parker. We're holding position at grid 7-4. I see you. Coming in from the south. Megan Walsh worked the communications console, trying to establish contact with other Velkaran cities. Most were silent. A few responded with desperate messages, begging for help that wouldn't arrive in time. The Marines only had so many troops, and Velshar was the priority target. Command. I'm getting reports from the outlying settlements, Megan said. The Krathax hit them first. There might not be anyone left. Amy felt cold anger settle in her chest. She had seen genocide before. Humanity had nearly wiped itself out in the resource wars before they learned better. Seeing another species try to do it to someone else brought back old memories, old rage. We save who we can, she said quietly. And we make the Krathax pay. For the ones we couldn't. Jake Harrison's company reached the city center after 3 hours of continuous fighting. The plaza here had been beautiful once, with fountains and gardens and public art. Now it was a battlefield, torn and broken. The Krathax had set up a command post in the council building, using it to coordinate their forces. That's our target, Jake told his officers. We take that building. We cut off their command structure. The rest will be easier. It's going to be heavily defended, Danny Rogers pointed out. Then we'll hit it hard. Ben, I want your missile team to knock down the front entrance. Alpha and Charlie companies will assault through the breach. Beta Company provides covering fire from the buildings across the plaza. The Marines moved into position. This was what they were trained for, what they had practiced in simulations and live fire exercises. Assault on a fortified position against a dug-in enemy. It was dangerous, but everything about being a Marine was dangerous. All units ready, Kyle Martinez reported. Execute, Jake ordered. The missiles hit the building's entrance simultaneously, 4 warheads impacting in a line. The front of the structure collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris. Before it could settle, the Marines were moving, sprinting across the open plaza with weapons firing. The Krathax poured out to meet them. Warrior forms, each one bred for combat. Each one designed to kill. They outnumbered the Marines 3-1, On any other day, against any other enemy, that might have mattered, but these were Terran Marines, and they had been forged in the fires of humanity's own brutal history. Ryan Bennett led his squad through the breach. Inside, the building was dark and filled with Krathax. He threw a grenade down the hallway, the explosion lighting up the interior for a moment. In that brief flash, he saw a dozen targets. "Frag out," he called, throwing another grenade. "Push through." The squad advanced into hell. It was close-quarters combat. The kind of fighting where training and instinct mattered more than equipment. Ryan's rifle bucked in his hands as he fired, the muzzle flash blinding in the darkness. Something grabbed his leg, and he looked down to see a Krathax trying to pull him down. He shot it in the face, then kicked free and kept moving. Lisa Carter was beside him, her knife in one hand and her pistol in the other. A Krathax leaped at her from the shadows, but she sidestepped and drove the knife into its neck joint. The creature thrashed and died, and Lisa moved to the next target without pause. They fought room by room, floor by floor. The Krathax defended every inch, but the Marines were relentless. They had learned warfare from a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. The sun rose over Velshar on the second day of fighting, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of red and orange. The Marines had been in continuous combat for 18 hours, and exhaustion was starting to show. But they kept fighting because that was what Marines did. Ryan Bennett sat behind a pile of rubble, changing the barrel on his rifle. The metal was too hot to touch without gloves, worn down from constant firing. Around him, his squad did the same, performing maintenance that kept them alive. Lisa Carter cleaned her weapon methodically, her face blank and professional despite the blood splattered across her armor. "How much ammunition do we have left?" Ryan asked. "Enough for another day of heavy contact. Maybe 2 if we're careful," Corporal Megan Walsh replied. She had taken over supply coordination for the squad after their usual logistics specialist caught shrapnel to the leg. "Resupply drops are scheduled for tonight. If we last that long," someone muttered. "We'll last," Ryan said firmly. "The Krathax are breaking. You can see it in how they move. They're not coordinated anymore." It was true. Without their command structure, the Krathax fought in smaller groups, easier to predict and counter. The Marines exploited every weakness, pressing their advantage, but there were still thousands of the creatures in the city, and each one had to be killed individually. Jake Harrison stood in what remained of a Velkaran school, looking at the small desks and colorful wall paintings. The children who learned here were dead now, killed in the first hours of the invasion. He felt the familiar weight of anger settle on him, cold and focused. "Sir, we have a situation," Lieutenant Kyle Martinez said, entering the room. "The Krathax are herding civilians toward the coastline. They're driving them into the ocean." Jake's jaw tightened. "Show me." The tactical display showed the western edge of the city, where thousands of Velkarans were being pushed toward the water. The Krathax had learned they couldn't hold the city, so now they were trying to kill as many civilians as possible before they died. "How many Marines can we get there?" Jake asked. "Charlie Company is closest, but they're engaged. It would take them 30 minutes to disengage and redeploy. We don't have 30 minutes." Jake looked at the map, calculating distances and routes. "What about air support?" "Oh, the attack craft are rearming. They won't be ready for another 20 minutes. Jake made his decision. "Get me Captain Rogers. And find me every available Marine within 5 clicks of that position. We're going in light and fast." 10 minutes later, Jake led a mixed force of 60 Marines toward the coastline. They moved at a run, carrying only their rifles and basic ammunition. Every second counted. Behind them, the city still burned. Ahead, civilians were dying. They heard the screaming before they saw the ocean. The Krathax had formed a line, driving the Velkarans forward like cattle. Those who tried to flee were killed immediately. Those who went into the water drowned, unable to swim in their panic. "Spread out," Jake ordered. "Hit them from 3 sides. We break their line and get the civilians behind us." The Marines deployed and opened fire. The Krathax line shattered under the assault, but they didn't retreat. Instead, They turned to face this new threat, abandoning the civilians to kill the Marines. It was exactly what Jake wanted. Keep firing. Draw them toward us. Give the Velkarons time to run. Corporal Ben Foster set up his missile launcher on a small rise overlooking the beach. From here, he could see the entire battlefield. Krathak's warriors charged the Marine positions in waves, and Ben made each shot count. The missiles streaked out one after another, each one finding a target. Sergeant Nicole Parker found herself face to face with a Krathak bigger than any she had seen before. It was a Bio-Titan, a living siege weapon that the swarm used to break through fortifications. Its armor was thick enough to stop small arms fire, and its claws could tear through concrete. I need heavy weapons on this thing, Nicole called into her radio. Negative, the response came back. All heavy weapons are committed. You'll have to handle it. Nicole looked at the Bio-Titan as it advanced toward her position. Behind her, a group of Velkaran children huddled against a wall, too scared to move. She couldn't retreat. She couldn't call for help. She had only her rifle, her sidearm, and her training. She ran toward the creature instead of away from it. The Bio-Titan swung at her with a massive claw, but Nicole slid under it, coming up right beneath its head. She emptied her magazine into the softer armor under its jaw, then rolled away as it tried to stomp her. The creature roared, green blood pouring from the wounds, but it didn't fall. Nicole reloaded and fired again, aiming for the same spot. More blood. More damage. The Bio-Titan staggered, its movements becoming slower. She kept firing, kept moving, kept inflicting damage. It took 4 magazines, but finally, the creature collapsed. Bio-Titan down, Nicole reported, breathing hard. Someone remind me never to do that again. Negative. Parker. Ryan Bennett's voice came back. That was the coolest thing I've ever seen. You're doing it again next time. Despite everything, Nicole laughed. It was a tired sound, but genuine. The fighting on the beach lasted 2 hours. By the end, the Krathaks were dead, and over 3,000 Velkaran civilians had been saved. It was a small victory in a war that was far from over. But it mattered. Jake sat on the sand, watching the medics work. Some Marines were wounded, including Corporal Eric Shaw, who had taken a claw to the shoulder. But they were all alive. And they had won. Ambassador Krelna approached carefully. The Velkaran leader looked older now, worn down by the stress and horror of the invasion. He carried a datapad. Translator active. Commander Harrison, he said through the device. I wanted to thank you personally. Those people you saved, they would have died without your intervention. We're not done yet, Jake replied. There are still Krathaks in the city. We won't stop until they're all dead. Krelna was quiet for a moment. I have never understood violence before. My people, we have always believed that reason and discussion could solve any problem. But the Krathaks, they do not reason. They do not discuss. No, they don't, Jake agreed. You humans, you understand violence. You are very good at it. Jake looked at the Velkaran leader. We've had a lot of practice. Earth wasn't a peaceful place for most of our history. We fought each other over everything. Resources, religion, territory, ideology. We nearly wiped ourselves out a dozen times. And yet you survived. We learned. Eventually, we figured out that working together was better than killing each other. But we never forgot how to fight. We just redirected it outward, instead of inward. Krelna watched the Marines as they regrouped and prepared to move out again. They were efficient, professional, and absolutely focused on their mission. I think I understand now why the galaxy whispers about humanity. You are protectors, but you are also warriors, both at the same time. That's about right, Jake said. We protect what's ours, and we fight what threatens it. Your people are under Terran protection now. That means something. Colonel Amy Rodriguez coordinated the final assault from her command post. The Krathaks were cornered in 3 sections of the city, surrounded and cut off from escape. Their bioships in orbit had withdrawn, abandoning their ground forces to die. It was standard Krathax behavior when a campaign failed. All units, begin final sweep, Amy ordered. No prisoners, no mercy. We clear every building, every basement, every sewer. I want this planet clean. All bitter. The Marines moved through the city in a methodical grid pattern. They found Krathax hiding in ruins, in underground tunnels, in any dark corner they could squeeze into. Each one was eliminated. It was brutal work, but necessary. If even a few survived, they could rebuild and attack again. Captain Danny Rogers led his company through the industrial district. Here the buildings were larger, with complex layouts and multiple levels. It was perfect terrain for ambushes, and the Krathax that remained were desperate. Stay alert, Danny told his Marines. They know they're dead. They'll try to take us with them. They cleared a factory floor by floor. In the basement, they found something that made even veteran Marines pause. The Krathax had set up breeding chambers here. Organic pods growing new warriors. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. In various stages of development. Burn it all, Danny ordered. I don't want anything left. The Marines set thermite charges throughout the chamber. When they detonated, the heat was so intense that the metal supports of the building began to melt. Every growing Krathax warrior died before it could be born. Lisa Carter found a Krathax hiding in a residential building, cowering in a closet like the Velcarans it had hunted. She felt no pity. This creature and its kind had killed millions of innocent people. She raised her rifle and fired once. By the end of the third day, the fighting was over. The Krathax and Velshar were dead. Every last one. The Marines had taken casualties. 37 killed, and over 100 wounded. But they had won. Ryan Bennett stood on a rooftop, watching the sun set over the damaged city. Below, Velcaron survivors were beginning to emerge from their hiding places. They moved carefully, still afraid, but alive. That was what mattered. Megan Walsh joined him, carrying 2 ration packs. Thought you might be hungry. Thanks. Ryan opened the pack and ate mechanically. He was too tired to taste it. You think we made a difference? Megan asked. Ryan looked at the civilians below. At the children holding their parents' hands. At the old Velcarans crying with relief. Yeah, he said. We made a difference, but the war wasn't over. The Krathax still controlled the surrounding territory. Other Velcaron settlements needed help. And somewhere out in space, the swarm's bioships were regrouping, planning their next attack. The countryside of Tethys Prime was beautiful. Rolling hills covered in purple grass, forests of tall trees that swayed in the wind, rivers that ran clear and clean. Before the invasion, Velcaron families would come here for recreation, to enjoy nature and find peace. Now it was a hunting ground. Ryan Bennett moved through the forest with his squad, weapons ready. Intelligence said a group of Krathax had fled here during the battle for Velshar. The creatures were hiding in the wilderness, trying to survive long enough to establish a new breeding site. The Marines couldn't let that happen. I've got tracks here, Corporal Lisa Carter said, kneeling beside a stream. The mud showed clear impressions of 6-legged creatures, heading deeper into the forest. Maybe 12 hours old. How many? Ryan asked. At least 20, probably more. Ryan checked his map. The tracks led toward a mountain range about 15 kilometers away. Plenty of caves there for the Krathax to hide in. We follow them. Stay alert. They know we're hunting them. The squad moved out, following the trail. Around them, the forest was quiet. Too quiet. The native animals had fled or been killed, leaving an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of boots on soil. Jake Harrison coordinated the hunt from a mobile command post set up in a small Velcaron village. The civilians here had all been evacuated to Velshar, leaving the buildings empty. Maps covered every surface, showing the deployment of Marine units across the region. We have contact in Sector 7, Lieutenant Kyle Martinez reported. Captain Rogers engaged a group of 15 Krathax. No casualties on our side. End quote. Good. What about the northern mountains? Bennett's squad is tracking a larger group, They should make contact within the next few hours. Jake studied the map. The Krathax were scattered, broken into small groups without coordination. It made them harder to find but easier to kill once located. The Marines were conducting a methodical sweep, clearing each sector before moving to the next. How long until we've covered the whole region? Jake asked. At current pace, 3 weeks, maybe 4. 3 weeks of hunting in the wilderness. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was necessary. Every Krathax left alive was a potential seed for a new invasion. Sergeant Nicole Parker's unit found a Krathax breeding site in an abandoned farm. The creatures had broken into the barn and started building organic pods in the darkness. 3 new warriors were already developing, their forms visible through the translucent membranes. Set charges, Nicole ordered. We burn everything. The Marines placed explosive charges throughout the barn. When they detonated, the structure collapsed in flames. The growing Krathax died instantly, and the adult guardians were caught in the blast. Nicole watched it burn with satisfaction. Site destroyed, she reported. Moving to next objective, Corporal Ben Foster's team ran into an ambush in a narrow valley. The Krathax had learned from their defeats, becoming more cautious and tactical. They waited until the Marines were committed to the terrain, then attacked from both sides. Contact front and rear, Ben called out. We're pinned down. The squad took cover behind rocks and returned fire. The Krathax couldn't match Marine weapons, but they had numbers. For every 1 killed, 2 more seemed to appear. We need air support, someone shouted. Negative. Too much tree cover, Ben replied. We fight our way out. Corporal Shaw, lay down suppressing fire. Everyone else, on me. We're pushing through the front. The Marines charged forward instead of retreating. It surprised the Krathax, who expected their prey to run. Ben's squad hit them hard, weapons firing continuously. The valley became a killing ground. But this time, the Krathax were the ones dying. When it was over, Ben counted his Marines. Everyone was alive, though several were wounded. The Krathax all lay dead. Good work, Ben said. Now let's get out of this valley before more show up. Colonel Amy Rodriguez received reports from across the planet. The hunt was going well, but it was taking longer than expected. The Krathax were adapting, learning from each encounter. They avoided large groups of Marines, instead targeting smaller patrols and isolated units. We need to change tactics, Amy told her staff. The Krathax are learning. We need to learn faster. Suggestions, ma'am? Kyle asked. Start using the terrain against them. Set traps. Lure them into kill zones. Make them think they have an advantage. Then crush them. The new tactics were implemented immediately. Marines would establish small, seemingly vulnerable positions, then ambush any Krathax that tried to attack. It worked. The creatures were driven by hunger and aggression, making them predictable. Captain Danny Rogers set up one such trap near a river crossing. His squad made camp in the open, fires burning bright, looking like easy targets. Then, they hid in the surrounding forest and waited. The Krathax came at midnight, sneaking through the darkness toward the camp. They found empty sleeping bags and cold fires. Before they could retreat, the Marines opened fire from all directions. The trap was perfect. Not a single Krathax escaped. Ryan Bennett's squad finally caught up to the group they had been tracking. The Krathax had taken shelter in a cave system in the mountains. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for a Marine in full armor. I don't like this, Lisa said, studying the cave mouth. It's a perfect ambush site. Then we don't go in the obvious way, Ryan replied. He pulled up a geological survey on his datapad. These mountains are limestone. Lots of interconnected caves. We find another entrance and come in from an unexpected direction. They spent 2 hours searching before finding a secondary entrance on the far side of the mountain. It was smaller, requiring them to remove their packs and crawl through. But it led into the same cave system. The squad moved through the darkness, night vision equipment turning everything green. The caves were damp and cold, water dripping from the ceiling. Somewhere ahead, The Krathax waited. Movement ahead, Lisa whispered. 30 meters. The squad spread out, taking positions behind rock formations. Through their night vision, they could see the Krathax clearly. There were more than expected. At least 40 creatures huddled in a large chamber. We can't fight that many in this terrain, Megan Walsh said quietly. Too confined. Ryan thought for a moment. We don't fight them here. We seal them in. Plant charges at both entrances. Bring down the roof. Bury them alive. It was harsh, but effective. The Marines retreated, placing explosives as they went. When they were clear, Ryan triggered the detonation. The mountain shook, and tons of rock collapsed into the cave system. The Krathax were trapped inside, with no food, no water, and no escape. Let them starve in the dark, Ryan said coldly. Sergeant Nicole Parker's unit discovered something disturbing in the southern forests. A Velkaran village that hadn't been evacuated. The buildings were intact but empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just an eerie absence. Where is everyone? One of her Marines asked. Nicole examined the village carefully. Doors were open. Meals sat half-eaten on tables. Personal belongings were scattered around. It looked like people had simply vanished in the middle of their daily activities. Then she found the trail. Footprints leading into the forest, hundreds of them, all heading in the same direction. They walked away, Nicole said. All of them. But why? The squad followed the trail for 3 kilometers before finding the answer. A clearing in the forest held a Krathax bioconstruct. Something the Marines hadn't seen before. It was a living pheromone generator, producing chemicals that affected the Velkaran nervous system. The villagers stood in neat rows around the construct, their eyes blank and empty. They were alive but not conscious, controlled by the Krathax chemicals. As the squad watched, several villagers walked forward and lay down near the construct. Small Krathax creatures emerged and began to feed on them. They're being farmed, Nicole realized with horror. The Krathax are keeping them alive, but using them as food sources. What do we do? Her corporal asked. We kill that thing and hope it breaks the control. The squad attacked the bioconstruct with everything they had. Missiles, grenades, and concentrated rifle fire tore into it. The creature screamed, a psychic wail that made the Marines' heads hurt. Then it died, collapsing into a puddle of dissolving flesh. The Velkaran villagers blinked, awareness returning to their eyes. They looked around in confusion, then horror as they realized where they were and what had been happening to them. Several started screaming. Get medics here now, Nicole ordered, and psychiatric support. These people are going to need a lot of help. The incident report reached Colonel Amy Rodriguez within hours. She read it twice, her expression growing darker. How many more of these constructs might be out there? She asked. Unknown, ma'am, Kyle replied. We've never encountered them before. Put out a priority alert to all units. If they find any Velkaran civilians acting strangely, assume Krathax mind control and proceed with extreme caution. We save the civilians if possible, but the constructs get destroyed immediately. The hunt continued. Days turned into weeks. The Marines pushed deeper into the wilderness, finding and eliminating every Krathax they could locate. It was exhausting work, mentally and physically draining. But they didn't stop. Jake Harrison walked through a cleared area, checking on his troops. They were tired, their armor dirty and worn, but their spirits remained strong. They knew they were making a difference. How much longer, sir? A young private asked. Until it's done, Jake replied. Until every last one of these creatures is dead, and the Velkarans can live without fear. Yes, sir. Jake continued his rounds, offering encouragement where needed and discipline where appropriate. Leadership during a long campaign was different from combat command. It required patience and consistency, making sure his Marines stayed focused and motivated. Ambassador Krelna visited the Marine positions regularly, bringing supplies and gratitude from his people. He had learned to recognize individual humans now, something that had been difficult at first. To Velkaran eyes, humans all looked similar. Commander Harrison, Krelna said, finding Jake outside the command post. I have news from Velshar. The reconstruction is beginning. My people are starting to rebuild. That's good, Jake replied. They'll need something positive to focus on. They want to build a memorial for the Marines who died protecting us. Jake was quiet for a moment. 37 names. 37 people who would never go home. They don't need to do that. But they want to. Your people gave their lives for strangers. That means something to us. It means something to us too, Jake admitted. Those were good Marines. Good people. They deserved better than to die on a world they'd never heard of before. They died as heroes. 6 weeks after the invasion began, Tethys Prime was finally at peace. The Krathaks were gone, eliminated to the last creature. The Velkarons emerged from their shelters and began the long process of rebuilding their civilization. Ryan Bennett stood on the memorial hill overlooking Velshar, watching the city slowly come back to life. The buildings were still damaged, but work crews moved through the streets every day. The Velkarons were learning construction techniques they had never needed before, building stronger structures that could survive attacks. Lisa Carter joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the Marine Field kitchen. Thought you could use this. Thanks. Ryan took the cup and sipped. It was terrible. Like all field coffee. But it was hot and familiar. You ever think about what happens next? For us, or for them? Both. Lisa looked at the city below. We leave. They stay. They try to rebuild what they lost and figure out how to keep it from happening again. You think they can do it? Learn to defend themselves? I don't know. They're not warriors. Never have been. But maybe they don't need to be warriors like us. Maybe they just need to be willing to fight when they have to. Ryan nodded slowly. It was a good answer. The Velkarons would never be as efficient at violence as humans. But they didn't need to be. They just needed to be dangerous enough that species like the Krathaks would think twice before attacking. Colonel Amy Rodriguez held a final briefing with Ambassador Krelna in the rebuilt council chambers. The Velkaron leader looked healthier now, the stress lines on his face less pronounced. His people had survived, and that gave him strength. We will be departing in 3 days, Amy said. The Valkyrie's edge is needed elsewhere. But we're leaving behind a training cadre of 50 Marines. They'll help you establish a defense force. We have never had soldiers before, Krelna said. Our entire civilization was built on the principle of non-violence. And that principle nearly got you wiped out, Amy replied bluntly. I'm not saying you need to become a warrior culture. But you need to be able to protect yourselves. The galaxy doesn't care about your philosophy. I understand that now. Krelna touched a datapad on the table. We have already received over 10,000 volunteers for the Defense Force. Young Velkarons who want to ensure this never happens again. That's a good start. But training will take time. Years, probably. Your people have to learn not just how to use weapons, but how to think tactically. How to coordinate. How to make hard decisions under pressure. Will your Marines teach us these things? They'll teach you what they can. The rest you'll have to learn through experience. Amy's expression softened slightly. It won't be easy. You're asking your people to fundamentally change who they are. The Krathaks already changed who we are. Krelna said quietly. We are no longer innocent. We have seen what the galaxy truly is. Now we must adapt, or die. The memorial ceremony was held on a clear morning. The Velkarons had built a monument on the site where the first Marines had landed. A tall structure of local stone carved with names and dates. The 37 Marines who died defending Tethys Prime were listed in precise letters. Jake Harrison stood at attention as the names were read aloud. Each one brought back memories. Private Miller, who had been in his company for only 2 weeks before taking a Krathak's claw to the chest. Sergeant Adams, a 15-year veteran who had died clearing a building full of civilians. Corporal White, killed by a biomine while scouting ahead of his unit. The Velkaron children sang something in their own language, a mourning song that needed no translation. The melody was sad and beautiful. Drifting across the memorial plaza, several Marines wiped their eyes, though none would admit to crying. After the ceremony, Ambassador Krelna approached Jake privately. I wanted to thank you personally, Commander. Not just for saving my people, but for teaching us an important lesson. What lesson is that? That strength and compassion are not opposites. Your Marines are capable of terrible violence, but they used it to protect the innocent. They killed without hesitation, but they killed to save lives. It is a balance we never understood before. Jake considered his words carefully. War is always terrible. Even when it's necessary, even when it's justified, it's still terrible. The goal should always be to avoid it if possible. But when someone forces your hand, when they threaten innocent people, you have to be willing to act. My people have always believed that any violence is wrong, and I respect that. But the Krathaks don't care about your beliefs. Neither did any of the other species that might have come here. If you want to keep your philosophy of peace, you need to be strong enough to defend it. Krelna nodded slowly. We are beginning to understand this. It is a hard lesson. The hardest ones usually are. Sergeant Nicole Parker supervised the first training session for Velcaran volunteers. The recruits stood in uneven lines, trying to maintain military bearing. They were nervous and uncertain, holding practice rifles like they might explode. This is going to take a while, Corporal Megan Walsh muttered beside her. Everything does, Nicole replied. Remember your first day in boot camp? You weren't much better. I was way better than this. You were terrible. You threw up after the first obstacle course. Megan laughed. Okay, fair point. Nicole called out to the recruits. Listen up. You're here because you want to protect your people. That's good. That's the right reason. But wanting to protect and being able to protect are two different things. We're going to teach you how to bridge that gap. She held up her rifle. This is a weapon. It's a tool for taking lives. That should scare you. If it doesn't, you're in the wrong place. But sometimes taking lives is necessary to save lives. That's what soldiers do. We carry the burden of violence so others don't have to. The Velcaran recruits listened intently. They were young, barely adults by their species' standards. They had grown up in a world of peace and prosperity, and then watched it burn. Now they were trying to ensure it never happened again. Training will be hard, Nicole continued. Some of you will quit. That's okay. Being a soldier isn't for everyone. But those who stick with it, who push through the difficulty and the fear, you'll become something your species has never had before. You'll become defenders. Captain Danny Rogers organized the Marine departure. 3 days of loading equipment, conducting final inspections, and saying goodbyes to Velcarans who had become friends during the campaign. It was always strange. This part. The fighting was over. But leaving felt incomplete somehow. You ready to go? Lieutenant Kyle Martinez asked. Yeah, Danny replied. It'll be good to get back to normal operations. Though this was pretty normal for us. Wasn't it? Show up. Fight the bad guys. Save the innocents. Move on. That's the job. Sometimes I wonder if there's more to it than that. If we're actually making a difference, or just putting band-aids on a bleeding galaxy. Kyle looked at the city of Velshar, where Velcarans walked streets that had been death traps 6 weeks ago. I think we made a difference here. These people are alive because we showed up. That counts for something. Yeah, Danny agreed. Ryan Bennett found himself training one particular Velcaran recruit who reminded him of himself at that age. Young, eager, and absolutely clueless about what he was getting into. The recruit's name was difficult to pronounce, so Ryan just called him Rookie. Why did you volunteer? Ryan asked during a break in training. My family lived in the northern settlements, Rookie replied through his translator. The Krathaks came before the Marines arrived. I was away at school. When I came home, everyone was dead. Ryan knew that story. He had heard versions of it from 100 different people on a dozen different worlds. I'm sorry. I don't want sympathy. I want to learn to fight so it never happens again. To my people. To anyone. Then pay attention and work hard. Being angry isn't enough. You need skill and discipline. I will learn. I must learn. Ryan nodded. Okay, rookie. Let's get back to work. The final day arrived. The Marines assembled at the landing zone, ready to board the transports that would take them to the Valkyrie's edge. Thousands of Velkarons came to see them off, lining the streets and standing on rooftops. Colonel Amy Rodriguez addressed her troops one last time. You did good work here, Marines. You saved a civilization and gave them a fighting chance. But our job isn't done. There are other worlds that need us, other people crying out for help. We answer those calls because that's what we do. She paused, looking at the faces of her command. They were tired, but proud. Satisfied with what they had accomplished. Remember the Marines we lost here. Remember the Velkarons we saved. Let both memories drive you forward. Now let's go home. The transports lifted off one by one, carrying the Marines back to orbit. Jake Harrison watched Tethys Prime shrink below him, the planet becoming smaller and smaller until it was just another blue-green sphere among countless others. Think we'll ever come back here? Lieutenant Kyle Martinez asked. Maybe, Jake replied. If they need us again. But hopefully, they won't. The Valkyrie's edge jumped to hyperspace, leaving Tethys Prime behind. On the planet's surface, Ambassador Krelna stood with the 50 Marines who had stayed behind as trainers. Together, they watched the Velkaran recruits practice basic formations. They're not very good yet, Sergeant Nicole Parker observed. No, Krelna agreed. But they're learning. In time, they will be capable. In time, you'll have a real defense force. Maybe even a real military, if you need it. I hope we never need it. But I am grateful to know it will exist if we do. Nicole nodded. That's the whole point. You build strength during peace, so you don't need it during war. Strong enough that nobody wants to test you. Like humanity. Like humanity, Nicole confirmed. We spent thousands of years fighting each other. We got very good at it. Now we use that skill to protect others. It's not a bad legacy. Weeks turned into months. The Velkaran Defense Force grew and improved. They would never be as skilled as Terran Marines, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to be dangerous enough. Ryan Bennett and his squad deployed to another world, answering another distress call. This time it was a mining colony under attack by pirates. Different enemy, same mission. Protect the innocent, eliminate the threat, move on. You ever think about retiring? Lisa Carter asked, as their transport descended toward another battlefield. Every day, Ryan replied. But not today. Today we've got work to do. The transport doors opened, revealing chaos and conflict below. Ryan and his Marines charged out. Weapons ready. Somewhere in the smoke and fire, people needed help. People who had cried out for salvation and got Terran Marines in response. It was what they did. What they had always done. What they would continue to do, as long as the galaxy needed them. Back on Tethys Prime, Ambassador Krelna stood at the memorial to the fallen Marines. Fresh flowers covered the base of the monument, placed there by grateful Velkarans who would never forget what had been done for them. Thank you, Krelna said quietly to the names carved in stone. You saved us when no one else would. You taught us that peace must be defended. We will remember. The sun set over Velshar, painting the sky in colors of orange and purple. The city was healing, growing stronger. The scars remained, but they were fading. Life continued, and somewhere in the darkness of space, the Terran Marines moved from crisis to crisis, from battle to battle. They were not perfect. They were not unstoppable, but they were willing, and sometimes that was enough. When aliens cried for salvation, when all hope seemed lost, when smoke filled the air and death walked the streets, it was these warriors who emerged. Not gleaming heroes from stories, but scarred soldiers who understood that salvation came with a cost. And they paid that cost. Again and again. Because someone had to. Because the innocent deserved protection. Because the strong should defend the weak. Because that was what Terran Marines did. They had been forged in fury, tempered by loss, hardened by necessity. They carried the violence of humanity's brutal past and redirected it toward protecting the galaxy's future. And when the next call came, When the next world burned, and the next civilization faced extinction, they would answer. They would always answer, because that was the promise humanity made when they reached for the stars. To protect those who could not protect themselves. To stand between the innocent and the darkness. To be the fury that saved instead of destroyed. The Velkarons had learned this lesson written in blood and sacrifice. Peace was precious, but only strength could preserve it. Kindness was beautiful, but only courage could defend it. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of species that took what they wanted and destroyed what they couldn't take. But it also had protectors, warriors who fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple principle that the innocent deserved to live. Terran Marines were those warriors, and the galaxy was learning to be grateful for that fact. They died doing their jobs, Jake corrected gently. That's what Marines do. We show up when people need help, and we do what needs to be done. Sometimes we don't make it home, but that doesn't make us heroes. It just makes us Marines. Krelna didn't fully understand the distinction, but he respected it. Humanity had a complex relationship with violence and sacrifice that his peaceful species was only beginning to comprehend. The hunt continued for another 2 weeks before Colonel Amy Rodriguez called it complete. The last confirmed Krathax had been eliminated, and extensive surveys showed no remaining biosignatures. The planet is clear, she announced to her assembled officers. Good work, everyone. Now comes the hard part. We have to make sure it stays clear. The Marines would be ready. They were always ready. Jake received new orders that evening. His company was to deploy to the countryside, hunting down Krathax that had spread beyond the city. It would take weeks, maybe months, to clear the entire planet. No rest for the wicked, Lieutenant Kyle Martinez said. Or for Marines, Jake replied. He looked at his troops, exhausted, but unbroken. Prep for deployment at dawn. We've got more work to do. The Velkarons watched the Marines prepare to leave the city. They didn't fully understand these strange beings who had saved them. The humans were friendly but distant, professional but cold. They killed with efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying. Ambassador Krelna understood better now. Humanity carried violence with them like a tool, something to be used when necessary. They didn't enjoy it, but they didn't shy away from it either. They had accepted that the galaxy was a dangerous place and had made themselves dangerous in response. It was a lesson the Velkarons would have to learn if they wanted to survive. NG. The Krathax were vicious, but humanity had written the book on organized violence. Jake Harrison reached the command center on the top floor. The Krathax commander was there. A massive creature twice the size of the warriors. It was linked to dozens of bio-interfaces, controlling the swarm through organic technology. The creature saw Jake and screamed, a sound that should have paralyzed any rational being with fear. Jake raised his rifle and emptied the magazine into it. The Krathax commander fell, its connection to the swarm severing instantly. Across the city, Krathax warriors stopped coordinating. Without central command, they reverted to individual action, making them easier targets. The tide of battle shifted decisively. Command center secured, Jake reported. Target eliminated. Amy allowed herself a small smile. Good work, Commander. Now comes the hard part. We have to clear the rest of them out. The fighting continued through the night and into the next day, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Terran Marines had arrived, and they brought with them humanity's oldest and most terrible gift. Krelna watched as the first Krathax warrior charged the new arrivals. He expected to see them torn apart, like every other defender had been. Instead, thunder filled the air. Bright flashes lit up the smoke. The Krathax warrior fell, its body torn by impacts Krelna didn't understand. More thunder, more flashes. The Krathax died. Through the smoke, Krelna saw them clearly now. Bipedal creatures in heavy armor, carrying weapons that roared with fire. They moved with purpose and precision, killing the Krathax with cold efficiency. Humans. The answer to their desperate prayer was humans, and they had brought war with them.